The moment I walked into the boardroom, I knew something was off. Everyone was already seated, too quiet, too still. The tension in the air wasn't just thick, it was suffocating. I scanned the room. Susan from HR avoided my eyes. Jamie, who used to laugh at my jokes, stared into her coffee like it was a black hole. And there, at the head of the table, was Victor Langley, my boss. The man who made charisma look like a weapon. He smiled. That fucking smile. "Ethan," he said, voice smooth as silk. "Thank you for joining us. Have a seat." I sat. I didn't want to, but my body moved on its own, like a marionette. My instincts screamed, but I silenced them. I always did. Victor folded his hands. "I've been reviewing your numbers. Here it comes. And your recent campaigns haven't quite delivered." "That's not true," I said before I could stop myself. "The Thompson launch was average," he cut me off. "Mediocre at best, which is why we've decided it's time to shift the energy." Silence. Then Susan slid a folder across the table. Inside was a resignation letter. Already signed. My name typed at the bottom in that clean, corporate font. "What the hell is this?" My voice cracked. Victor leaned back, watching me like a cat watches a trapped bird. "A graceful exit, Ethan, or we can go the other way. You know, with a formal inquiry into your recent absences, the complaints, your instability." My blood froze. "You told me to take time off, for my health. And I supported you," he said, with faux sincerity leaking from every pore. "But the board has concerns." "Concerns?" I looked around the room, desperate for a lifeline. "You all know what he's done, what he says when the doors are closed." No one looked up. Victor stood, signaling the end. "It's been a pleasure, Ethan. Truly." I stood, too, not out of dignity, but because if I didn't, I'd collapse. My legs shook, my heart pounded. I grabbed the folder, shoved it into my bag, and walked out. Down the hall, past the glass offices, the polished chrome, the fake smiles. Past the memories of late nights, broken deadlines, and the voice in my ear whispering, "You're not good enough." In the elevator, I saw myself in the mirrored walls, pale, shaking, eyes rimmed red. A man hollowed out. My phone buzzed. A message from Victor. "Don't let the door hit you, champ." I dropped the phone on the floor of the elevator and laughed. And then I cried. I didn't sleep much after that day. The shadows in my apartment stretched longer, even in daylight. I stopped checking my email. I stopped answering calls. Weeks passed in a blur of unfinished meals and unopened curtains. But I didn't break. Not completely. Somewhere in the haze, I made a list. Not on paper, on my kitchen wall. I wrote his name first, Victor, then underneath, "Make him feel it." I didn't know what it was yet. I just knew I wanted him to feel as small, as powerless, as worthless as I had. I started small, quietly. I reached out to former colleagues, people who had left the agency and had stories, plenty of them. Turns out I wasn't special. Victor had a pattern. Humiliation disguised as motivation, threats masked as performance reviews, micromanagement to the point of obsession. Some had panic attacks. One had a breakdown. I tried to tell someone. One ex-employee, Mark, told me over coffee. But HR's in his pocket. He's untouchable. That only lit the fire deeper in my chest. I dove into research, corporate law, whistleblower protections, anonymous tips. If I couldn't take him down directly, I'd dismantle the pedestal he stood on. I tracked the agency's recent campaigns, found a few discrepancies in the metrics he'd reported to the board, fudged numbers, inflated returns. I compiled everything into a digital dossier. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I didn't breathe unless I was reading or writing or searching. My apartment became a war room, sticky notes, printouts, empty coffee cups. 3 weeks in, I found what I needed. A financial report buried in quarterly filings, Numbers that didn't match the client invoices. It wasn't proof of fraud, not yet, but it was enough to trigger an inquiry. I drafted a letter to the board, anonymous, with attachments. I read it 10 times before hitting send. Then I waited. 1 week, 2, nothing, no headlines, no fallout, no whispers. Then I saw the company's press release. Victor Langley appointed as Global Creative Director. He'd been promoted. I stood in the middle of my apartment, the letter trembling in my hand. My chest tightened, throat burned. Everything I'd done, every sleepless night, every memory clawed from the pit of my gut, meaningless. I went back to the list on my wall and scratched through Victor, but not because he was gone. Because this wasn't working. Not like this. I needed to see him. Face to face. I booked a ticket to New York. That's where they'd moved the headquarters. I didn't have a plan. Just the face in my head, the one that smiled as he erased me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was personal. And I was ready to finish it. New York was colder than I remembered. The kind of cold that slipped under your coat and curled around your spine. I stood across the street from the agency's new glass fortress, 40 stories of polished ambition, and felt like an insect staring at a beehive. I waited until dusk. The lobby lights flickered on, casting golden reflections onto the wet pavement. I watched employees file out in waves, heads down, coats pulled tight. Then finally he emerged. Victor. He hadn't changed much. Same tailored coat, same confident gait. But there was a weariness in his shoulders now, something almost human. I trailed him from a distance, weaving through crowds, keeping my hood up. He stopped at a small bar off 8th Avenue, a place that looked too low-end for a man like him. I slipped inside after a few minutes, settling in a booth in the back. He was at the bar, alone, nursing something amber. No entourage, no fake charm. He stared at his glass like it had answers. My hand hovered over my phone. One picture, one message. I could destroy him, leak everything. A disgraced executive, burned reputation, closure. But I didn't lift the phone. I just watched. He ordered another drink, then another. His hands trembled when he reached for the glass. When the bartender turned away, Victor dropped his head into his hands. A soft, shaking movement, like he was trying to hold himself together. And suddenly, it hit me like a freight train. This wasn't power. This wasn't control. This was a man unraveling. I sat there, frozen. Something inside me cracked, not with triumph, but with something messier, something I didn't want. Pity. I left the bar before he saw me, walked for hours, ended up in a diner on the edge of Queens, staring at a slice of pie I didn't want. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out. I had come all this way, spent 3 years feeding on rage like it was fuel, built my life around a single mission. And now I was just tired. When I got back to the hotel, I opened my laptop, pulled up the dossier, every file, every detail. I hovered over the folder and clicked delete. It was gone in seconds. I stared at the empty desktop. Then I cried. Really cried. The kind of crying that curls you in half, that makes you feel like your skin doesn't fit right. I cried for the years I'd lost, for the nights I spent talking to a ceiling, for the friends I'd pushed away, for the job that became a prison, for the man who'd done it, and the man I had become chasing him. I thought revenge would fix me, but it hadn't. It had only made me smaller, meaner, like him, and I hated that more than I ever hated him. The next morning I woke up in my hotel room, the city a dull hum outside the window. My throat was raw, eyes swollen. I felt stripped down to nothing, no vengeance, no purpose, just breathe, just presence. It was the first time I felt real in years. I showered, shaved, and dressed without looking in the mirror. There was no one to impress, no war to prepare for. But I needed to move, to do something that wasn't about him. I walked aimlessly until I found a bookstore, not one of those sleek chains, but a real one, dusty, cramped, alive. I wandered between the shelves, fingers brushing spines like they might whisper something back. In the corner sat a woman, sketching in a notebook. Late 30s maybe, short black curls, paint-stained hoodie. She caught me staring and smiled. "Looking for anything specific?" she asked. I shook my head. Not really, just hiding. Her smile widened, kind but sharp. Me too. Her name was Lena. She was an illustrator. Freelance, like me now. We ended up at the cafe next door, sipping burnt coffee and swapping stories. Nothing deep at first, just life, art, absurd clients. But then the conversation twisted naturally, like it wanted to go somewhere darker. "I used to work for a studio," she said, eyes drifting. "Creative director was a predator, emotionally, sometimes physically. I didn't even realize how deep it got until I left." I blinked. Same. Mine just broke me slowly. She looked at me then. Really looked. "So what did you do?" "Planned a whole revenge, 3 years of it." I laughed, bitter and brittle. Then I saw him, and he was already broken, like, truly broken. And I didn't feel anything I was supposed to, just sad. She nodded slowly. "Because it was never about him." I stared at my cup. Then what was it about? She didn't answer right away, just took a pen from her pocket and started sketching on a napkin. When she slid it across the table, I saw myself. Small figure, arms open, walking away from a giant crumbling statue. "About this," she said, letting it fall. I don't know what made me do it, but I started coming back, not to the agency, to life. I moved to a smaller city, took on freelance clients that didn't drain my soul. I started drawing again, something I'd stopped doing after college, opened a tiny studio, reached out to people I'd pushed away. Not all of them responded. That was okay. Lena and I kept in touch. Sometimes we'd send each other what we were working on, notes, critiques, jokes. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were others who'd walked through fire and built gardens in the ash. I stopped waking up angry, not because I forgot, but because I'd finally stepped out of the shadow of his name. And for the first time, I was living a life that felt like mine. It was a Thursday in October, 3 years to the week since I'd walked out of that boardroom. I hadn't marked the date. It just fell into place, like a leaf that knows exactly when to drop. I was in the city for a client meeting, some mid-level tech startup trying to rebrand. Nothing urgent, nothing that could have prepared me for who I saw stepping out of a liquor store on 47th. Victor Langley. He looked wrecked. Not the man I remembered. His once perfect hair was thinned out, uneven. His suit was wrinkled, like it had been slept in. And he wasn't walking. He was drifting, like his body had forgotten what purpose felt like. A brown paper bag dangled from his hand. I could smell the booze from across the street. He didn't see me. I followed. Not out of instinct this time, but with something colder. Not rage, not pity, curiosity. He ducked into a dim, forgotten bar. The kind where the floor sticks and the bartender doesn't ask for tabs. I waited 5 minutes, then walked in after him. He was hunched over the counter, eyes glazed. The bartender poured him another without a word. I took the stool beside him, slowly, deliberately. He didn't look up. "You look like shit," I said. Victor blinked, turned. His eyes struggled to focus, then widened just a little. Not fear, not even surprise. Recognition. "Ethan," he slurred. "Of course." He tried to straighten up, but it didn't work. His voice cracked. "Here to finish the job?" "No job left," I said, calm. "You did it yourself." He chuckled, bitter and wet. "They took everything, you know. The board, After the audit, turns out someone whispered in the wrong ear. I didn't respond. He looked at me again, and this time, I saw it. Behind the bloodshot eyes, beneath the sagging face, something had hollowed him out. A quiet, gnawing thing. My wife left, he said. Took the kids. I don't blame her. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. Just weight sharing. Something to tether himself to the ground. I took a sip of my drink. It tasted like smoke and old metal. You remember what you said to me the day I left? I asked. He didn't answer. You called me a champ. Victor laughed, then coughed hard. Yeah, sounds like me. I looked at him, really looked, at the man who once held my life in his palm like it was glass, now cracked, pathetic, human. I came back to destroy you, I said. But there's nothing left to destroy. He nodded, not out of guilt, out of exhaustion. I stood, tossed a few bills on the bar. Don't follow me, I said. Victor didn't move. I stepped out into the street. The air was sharp, the sky a burning gray. For the first time in years, my chest didn't ache. Not from vengeance, not from hate, from release. He sat in the bar's window, silhouetted against neon and rain. Shoulders hunched, hand clutching a drink he no longer tasted. A flickering sign above him buzzed and blinked, casting soft, broken light across his face. I watched from across the street, for a long time. Then I turned and walked away. No drama, no words, just the sound of my shoes on wet pavement, and the feeling of something loosening in my chest, like breath held too long finally exhaled.